Okay, no one has ever obtained this legendary sword. I'm kind of curious. Subscribe to Necro War and leave a like. It is really awesome. Yeah, no one has obtained this legendary sword. Let's check it out.
Type of weapon, with exceedingly rare exceptions, you'll never acquire it. Neither the game's inherent design nor its central narrative would permit such immense power to be wielded by a mere adventurer like yourself. I'm referring to the armaments held by the Titans themselves, the Keepers, and other profoundly potent lore characters. In this video, my aim is to compile information about the most magnificent items within the very universe of Warcraft, legendary artifacts that players will
Okay, this is cool. This is more of a lore video. This is actually cool.
Likely never truly possess or control. And we'll start with the Titans. Titans are colossal entities who shape the very destiny of the universe. They traveled across countless worlds, fought against the forces of the old gods and the void, and watched over planets like Azeroth. Aman'Thul. His weapon may not be the most magnificent in existence, but he himself is a key figure in the cosmic order. He wielded the power of thunder, releasing bolts of pure energy upon his enemies. His weapon, known as Oradur, was a staff infused with the might of storms, glowing with a violet-yellow hue. Little else is known about it, except that it looked and struck like living lightning. So, let's move on. Ionar was the one responsible for life in our universe. She also wielded a staff, Sessional. Ionar was the one responsible for life in our universe. She also wielded a staff, Sessional. It was a beautiful weapon, seemingly woven from life itself. Entwined with vines, it inspired hope in the hearts of the desperate. A small fragment of Sessional appeared in Dragonflight as a trinket called the Paracausal Fragment of Sessional. The item was slightly different from its earlier test version. Some Wowhead users even speculated that, since heroes would travel to the Emerald Dream, Ionar's story might return in that expansion. Given her deep connection to nature, the Emerald Dream would be the perfect place to revisit her legacy. Norgannon didn't use a weapon in the traditional sense, but possessed a powerful artifact, the discs, which amplified his magic and made his spells catastrophic. These discs were not only a source of power, but also a repository of knowledge, containing secrets.
This is an interesting way to have power. I never heard of like in fantasy, like someone using discs as a way to store power. It's just like interesting weapon
of the universe. Their magic was said to rival even the combined efforts of other Titans in scope and precision. Here, a discrepancy arises between the non-canonical Warcraft RPG and the modern game. Many details about Titan weapons come from the RPG, as there are few other sources. In the RPG, it was hinted that Norgannon may have lost the discs, and that they might have ended up on Azeroth. It was even said he could one day return to reclaim them. Naturally, players first thought of the discs found in Uldaman, whose mysterious nature hinted at a great source of knowledge and power. However, in later lore, it was clarified that the Uldaman discs were not Titan-made, but rather created by the Keepers, specifically Loken and Mimiron, and instead of universal secrets, they mainly held the history of Azeroth. Khaz'goroth, the Shaper of Worlds, also wielded a remarkable weapon. As a master smith, his hammer was more than just a tool. It was an extension of himself, forged with purpose and raw creative power. We saw a form of this hammer in Legion. According to the story, the Pantheon had granted relics millennia ago to help shape Azeroth into a beautiful and balanced world. The Hammer of Khaz'goroth was among these sacred gifts, but as power shifted across Azeroth over the ages, the artifact passed through many hands. It was first held by the Keepers, later discovered by the Highborn Elves, and even briefly claimed by Deathwing during his rise. In Legion, the High Mountain Tauren were entrusted with guarding the hammer after it was taken from them. Eventually, it played some role in restoring Illidan's body, and during the Tomb of Sargeras raid, it, along with other relics, helped the heroes seal the Burning Legion's portal. What happened to the hammer afterward remains unclear. It was likely secured in Dalaran after the campaign, but with the city's destruction at the start of the War Within, its current whereabouts are a complete mystery. Agramar, he's arguably one of the most fascinating Titans in the game's lore. He was a loyal friend and comrade-in-arms to Sargeras, who would later become a universe-spanning traitor. Through blood and sweat, they fought side by side, waging countless battles to cleanse the universe of chaos. Agramar deeply admired Sargeras' strength and conviction, and their bond was once thought unbreakable. He didn't just influence our Azeroth, he also aided the Orcs' homeworld, Draenor. he discovered that on this planet, the Evergrowth was attempting to consume the entire world. He created the Gron, massive giants, to combat this force. In the future, the Gron would birth Colossals, and Colossals would birth Grons, thus forming an entire chain of races. And what about his weapon? His weapon was Taishalach. Here again are differences with the Warcraft RPG. There, this weapon originated from another weapon, Gorshalach. When Sargeras began to descend into madness, the sword split. One part became Agramar's sword, the other Sargeras' weapon. But now, Sargeras' sword and Agramar's are separate and don't share a single origin. Yet this didn't prevent them from clashing in battle. When Agramar tried to stop his Pantheon brother, the two Titan swords met in a duel. An energy release occurred, and both swords shattered. A chipped piece of Taishalach was filled with fire. This is how it appears to us in World of Warcraft. We couldn't obtain the Titan's actual weapon, but we could drop a cosmetic version of the sword, and, by the way, it looked really cool. It had a tiny drop chance, but it was worth it. The same applies to the weapon of another Titan, Argus, who unfortunately became a prisoner of the insane Sargeras. His weapon was a scythe that glowed blue. It sliced opponents apart, destroying even the strongest. From Argus, just like Agramar, a cosmetic version of the scythe dropped, which could vary by raid difficulty. Considering the power of these items, it's unlikely we'll ever get anything beyond cosmetic versions. And a perfect example of this is of course Sargeras and his sword. He created the Burning Legion and launched a crusade against entire worlds. Over millennia, he created a number of artifacts, for instance, the Scepter of Sargeras, which also served as the Warlock artifact weapon in Legion. To some extent, he contributed to the creation of the Sargeras Spear, the Eye of Sargeras, and even Atiesh, but the most important and powerful was, naturally, Sargeras' sword. This is a very rare instance where we see a Titan's weapon used at full power. This colossal blade was plunged into Azeroth by Sargeras before his defeat at the end of Legion. The sword is truly
let me just... Okay.
immense, genuinely colossal. With certain graphic settings, you could even see it directly from the Horde capital, Orgrimmar, despite Silithus and Durotar being separated by several zones. In both cinematics and the game itself, the sword was the size of an entire mountain. Its sheer scale instantly conveys the overwhelming power wielded by Sargeras. And if we disregard certain conventions, according to fan calculations, the sword was literally the second highest point in Azeroth, surpassed only by the tallest mountain in the Dragon Isles. Dreaming of getting your hands on this behemoth is impossible, but now we understand that when the lore states Sargeras cleaved entire worlds with his sword, it no longer seems so ephemeral and abstract when you see a mountain-sized sword in Silithus. Now let's discuss the Keepers, the powerful creations of the Titans, who were specifically designed and tasked to watch over and protect Azeroth throughout its long history. We often know even less about the Keepers' weapons than we do about the Titans. In some cases, beyond the mere fact of a weapon's existence, we know nothing else. For example, Arkidas in Uldaman carries a hammer that doesn't stand out with any particular features. Hodir wields a colossal mace from which a blue mist emanates. Another Keeper, Odin, used a spear. We've seen him wield this impressive weapon many times throughout the game, and Blizzard even revealed detailed concept art of it. The spear has two distinct modes, a bright luminous form and a dark thundering one that crackles with power. It looks incredibly striking, but unfortunately, we still can't obtain it in-game. Thorim's hammer, in turn, was an even more powerful item. I recently spoke about it, so I'll be brief. There were ice giants who had a good relationship with Thorim, and there was the Keeper Loken, who was corrupted by the forces of the old gods. Loken convinced Thorim that the ice giants were a threat. They supposedly killed his wife. Thorim believed this, and hurled his hammer directly at the location where the battle between the giants and the ice dwarves was taking place. Due to the weapon's power, the entire battle scene was frozen in time for ages, creating a rather beautiful spot in Northrend. But later, the ice giants and Thorim reconciled, and the hammer returned to his hands once more. There are a few other Keeper weapons that we were able to acquire, typically in Legion as artifacts. Since this video is primarily about unobtainable items, let's briefly cover who had what and how it ended up in players' hands. Freya, once long ago, intended to imbue all of Azeroth with life and nature. During her travels, she ventured to Pandaria, a land rich with ancient magic and mysteries. From one of the first seeds, the tree, Fuzan, emerged. Greenery began to grow around the tree, spreading slowly but steadily across the entire continent. From Fuzan's branches, she decided to create the eponymous staff, which became the monk's artifact weapon, and which she used during her wanderings. Mimiron has a similar story. Mimiron himself used a techno-hammer, let's call it that. Through complex analysis and painstaking work, Titan Strike was created, powered by a special lightning spark. Later, this weapon became the hunter's artifact. What happened to Mimiron's techno-hammer is a mystery, lost in the sands of time. Keeper Ra received one of the coolest weapons, gifted to him directly by one of the Titans. The Fist of Ra-Den became Keeper Ra's companion for millennia, and although Ra himself and his projections appeared several times in the game, even becoming a boss in Neolotha, we never encountered him with the weapon in hand. This is because the Fist of Ra-Den was lost many years ago. Tyr's weapon is probably the most remarkable. It's bright, gleaming. It shines with light, emitting a golden mist. Long ago, Tyr helped the proto-dragons contend with Galakrond, a terrifyingly massive and menacing dragon. The monster was stopped, but the price was steep. Tyr lost his hand, and he named his hammer the Silver Hand as a reminder of his sacrifice. But he lost the item due to Loken's betrayal. To cut a long story short, servants of the old gods were sent after him. He fought for 6 days and nights, but perished, saving his comrades. The weapon was lost, but the legacy was not forgotten. Later, paladins managed to find Tyr's tomb and also recover the lost item. The hammer, incidentally, has an alternative version. In Dragonflight, we had the honor of traveling through different timelines and even seeing pieces of an alternative Azeroth. In the Dawn of the Infinite, we encountered a dark version of Tyr. When we defeat the Keeper, the Infinite Hand drops from him. This item differs from our version in appearance. If ours is bright and shining, this one is rather dark and thundering. Now, I want to talk about Warcraft characters whose weapons are still unavailable to players, even though their owners are dead. We'll start with Ner'zhul. Ner'zhul was a great orc shaman, but due to foolishness, some naivety, and the influence of the Burning Legion, he led the Horde down the path of corruption. Although at some point he realized he had brought an entire race to the brink of an abyss, he could no longer change the situation. In alternate Draenor, you can see him wielding a Staff of Souls. Nothing was known about this staff in our universe, so we'll assume it's a new addition from the alternate Ner'zhul. The staff isn't dropped after Ner'zhul's death. Moreover, its story continues into Legion. Alternate Gul'dan managed to break through into Azeroth. In one comic, there was even a panel where Gul'dan used a staff similar to the Staff of Souls. And in an old Draenor model of Gul'dan, he actually used this very item. However, when we encountered Gul'dan in the Legion raid, he was wielding a completely different weapon, a simple fell staff, both in its normal and corrupted versions. Where the Staff of Souls disappeared remains a mystery. It's conceivable that this was simply a minor oversight by the developers, who perhaps confused the items, or it might represent a discarded plot thread. Incidentally, the original staff shares a similar fate. Gul'dan was frequently depicted with a rather unassuming staff, thoroughly imbued with fell energy. While not overtly remarkable, it was nonetheless a significant artifact. Its ultimate destiny after Gul'dan's defeat is unknown. It seemingly vanished without a trace. Only in recent times have developers introduced a cosmetic recreation of the item. Furthermore, during the promotional campaign for the Warcraft film, players had the opportunity to acquire a more powerful and visually impressive version of Gul'dan's staff, specifically the one he wielded in the movie itself. The true fate of the original staff remains lost to history.
Okay.
Among the lost weapons, we can include the Harmonic Mallet. This formidable hammer first emerged 10,000 years ago. At that time, the Mogu had invented the Divine Bell, whose chimes debuffed their enemies. In response, the Pandaren decided to craft a countermeasure, a hammer that would serve as an antithesis to the bell. However, the hammer was subsequently stolen, and to prevent its misuse, it was shattered into several fragments. Nevertheless, years passed. The Horde and Alliance were engaged in a military campaign on a new continent. The Alliance successfully reassembled the hammer and even wielded it against their primary foe, Garrosh Hellscream. Prince Anduin Wrynn himself bore it. But after the events of Pandaria, the item was simply forgotten. Theoretically, this artifact holds immense value for an entire race, at the very least as a historical legacy. Yet, for 12 years, we could only speculate about its whereabouts. In 2024, data miners unearthed information indicating the item would reappear in the game, and in the War Within expansion, we were able to purchase a cosmetic version of the hammer using currency from time-walking events. However, there was absolutely no lore provided about what transpired, where the hammer currently is, and so forth. We were simply presented with the fact that a cosmetic version was now available to everyone interested. Kilrog Deadeye was a terrifying orc, the ruthless leader of one of the clans. Once, his clan faced incredibly difficult times as they waged war against another intelligent race, the Arakoa. Since orcish clans at that time were not united under a single banner, Kilrog made a desperate pact. He sacrificed his eye, but in return, he gained the terrifying ability to foresee the future, specifically to witness his clan rising again and achieving dominance. This vision indeed came to pass, shaping the fate of his people for generations to come. Despite being one-eyed, Kilrog was an exceptionally skilled fighter. He wielded a peculiar weapon, a menacing mace adorned with the riveted fangs of large creatures. The orc fought against humans in both the First and Second Wars. In the latter, he even played a crucial role in enabling the remnants of the orcs to escape from the crumbling Draenor back to Azeroth. However, he himself perished during a fierce battle against the Alliance expedition on Draenor. What happened to his distinctive weapon remains a complete mystery, leaving many to wonder if it still lies hidden somewhere on that shattered world. Theoretically, the Alliance expedition could have confiscated the mace for themselves. Otherwise, the mace might still lie buried somewhere in the sands of the Hellfire Peninsula. Neither in the Burning Crusade nor in other expansions was the weapon ever recovered. However, in alternate Draenor, an alternate Kilrog appeared, and he wielded essentially the same weapon. We witnessed him fighting with it during his final battle, before he was ultimately slain by the heroes of Azeroth. Yet, the mace still didn't drop from him. In the raid, we could only obtain a corrupted version of the orcish blade. Although its general features indeed resembled what Kilrog carried, it still had quite a few differences. The original, uncorrupted model that Kilrog fought with literally 2 seconds before his death remained unobtainable for us.
Oh, that's cool. Thank you, Necrowar, for the video. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like.